So welcome to this webinar. This is Benefits of Collaboration. My name is Neil Wilkins, and this is part of the Cambridge Marketing College Personal and Professional Development Series. We have taken quite a journey as we've been through this particular series, and I haven't actually been counting, but as you can see from the slide, we have had quite a significant number of really interesting, thought-provoking, hopefully very beneficial and positive sessions. And we've covered a whole host of topics, everything from emotional intelligence and empathy through to thought leadership, flexibility and creativity, and most recently resilience. But we're here today to talk about the benefits of collaboration and team working. And the remaining two webinars in this series, on the 10th of December, we have reflection skills. And on the 17th, just prior to Christmas, we'll finish the whole series with self-motivation. And what better way to begin 2022 than actually becoming even more motivated than you are right here today. So for me, this has been a really exciting and energizing series of topics that we've covered here. We will be extending these through into next year as we talk through the continuing need for professional and personal development in all of our careers, no matter what level we actually are. So if you're interested in coming along to the other two events that we have remaining in December, head over to marketingcollege.com/events for more information. So what are we here to talk about today? Well, it is the concept of collaboration. Now, of course, you can think when you're collaborating, it's all about teamwork, it's all about other people, it's all about obviously how you interact with the others who you are collaborating with. But we need to get a really clear definition here to get us started. And I always, if you listen to any of my other webinars here, that you will always know that this is kind of where we begin. So we've kind of set the expectation of really very clearly what we're going to be talking about. So what is collaboration? Well, Cambridge Dictionary says it's the act of working together with other people or organizations to create or achieve something. So collaboration always has an end goal in sight. There's always a reason for getting together. It's not just simply a communication. It's not just simply a conversation or a project that you might do in isolation. This is all about working and creating, and you could argue co-creating with others a different kind of outcome than you have right now. And this is nothing new. The concept of collaboration and team working is something that has been around for a long time. Henry Ford once famously said, coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success. And if everyone is moving forward together, then success takes care of itself. So this means we are talking about a hugely relevant topic when it comes to both your professional life and also personal life, because this reads across into kind of all facets of our everyday living. Collaboration can achieve so much more than actually when we operate or attempt to operate in isolation. And that's something in this session which we're going to explore a little bit more in detail. So really, why collaborate? Well, hopefully by this point you've already thought, well, okay, it makes a little bit of sense because I probably don't know everything. And I would always say, because you can't do everything yourself is a good reason to collaborate. And you don't always know what you don't know, even though sometimes you do know what you don't know. In other words, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on around your world, around the project that you might be thinking about. And of course, if you try and achieve everything, you aren't necessarily playing to your strengths. You might be compromising, you might be spreading yourself a little bit too thinly to actually achieve what it is you want to do. So one of the reasons for collaborating is to kind of infill those things, those skills, those areas where, you know, you might even be a little bit lacking technically. You might not have the desire to do certain things, or it just might not be physically possible for you to do more than you can do. So a huge benefit of collaboration is to kind of extend the reach, if you like, of the kind of resources and the abilities that you have to achieve something. Now, the first model I want to kind of bring to your attention, and this is worth you spending a lot more time with, and I would recommend if you're not familiar with Edward de Bono's work, that you actually do a little bit of research and find out, because he did a lot of work around this concept of lateral thinking within projects, within goals, within objectives, and things that you're looking to achieve. And in essence, really problem solving. Now, of course, with collaboration, this is where you can really score, and you can actually achieve more by thinking and operating outside of the box. And there is this phrase, outside of the box thinking. And one of the big benefits of doing this in a collaborative sense is that you can actually tap into innate skills and preferences of others that might not actually be something that you're particularly good at. Okay, so Edward de Bono, and I'm going to take you through his concept of the 6 hats model. He called it the 6 thinking hats, and what he would suggest as part of this lateral thinking model for kind of critical thinking, kind of figuring out actually what is it we're trying to solve here as we start to collaborate or as we work together as a team, and then really establishing some really kind of creative clarity, if you like, in terms of the goals, the targets, but also what is kind of feasible and what is possible. So he created this 6 hats model, and would literally recommend that you have 6 hats of different colors: white, red, black, yellow, green, and blue. And depending on who was actually wearing the hat in the moment, that was what they were considering. So the white hat was all about objectivity. So fact finding, doing the research, maybe doing this as part of the team. So who would you have in your team? Who would you want to collaborate with? Who would be wearing the white hat? So this would be about fact finding, research, and objectivity. If you wanted then to bring some kind of emotion and passion and maybe a bit more of an intuitive feel into the team working, you'd be putting on the red hat. And this would be tapping into your kind of innate intuition, your kind of gut reaction, if you like, to the problem solving or to the task that the team or the collaboration has set for itself. So we've got the white hat and the red hat. The black hat is what we would term the caution, pessimism, or kind of like reality check, if you like. So when you put the black hat on, what you're doing is you're encouraging almost the negative critiquing of this kind of emotion or passion, because it's very easy when you're doing projects or when you're setting out on a particular task to get really kind of excited and really up for it and almost carried away. Well, by putting the black hat on, it allows you then to kind of come down a bit and sort of think, okay, let's kind of look at this in a real kind of proper sort of sense check. Let's look at this in a really kind of realistic way. He then would say, well, okay, well, it might be time then for the yellow hat. And that is the hat that you put on for the kind of the optimism in the collaboration or the team working or the project. So those who are going to be wearing the yellow hat are encouraged to think positively about all of the possible benefits of this team working or collaboration. So we have the white hat: objectivity, research, background thinking, and context setting. Red hat, bringing the passion into the project or the collaboration. The black hat, dealing in a kind of a real sensibility kind of way about, okay, well, let's do a reality check on this. And the yellow hat, bringing the optimism, the hope, the possibilities, and all the kind of positive potential benefits of working together. The 5th hat is the green hat, and this is where you start to get super creative. And you would probably want a green hat wearer on your team if you're kind of starting to put a team together. So the green hat wearer is all about being inventive, being creative, and actually kind of coming up with sort of new approaches. And again, this is very much the thinking outside of the box. So do you see what's kind of happening here? Even though you might sort of think, well, we haven't actually made much progress here, because all we're doing is actually putting, a whole bunch of hats on, and we're kind of sort of, treating this project or this challenge, in its entirety, but we haven't actually started solving it yet. But what you're doing by thinking creatively, thinking outside of the box, thinking laterally from different perspectives, then what you're doing is you're setting a really sound context for achieving something, the project, the goal, or the objective that you're setting. And the final hat in this 6 hats model from Edward Bono is the blue hat. And this is all about synthesizing the ideas together, prioritizing all of those opportunities, taking that sensibility check, putting the numbers behind it, backing it up with the research, and creating a plan for the way forward, organizing, directing the team or the group. And so for me, this 6 hats model really plays out well and really beautifully in terms of project management at the same time as managing a team. Now, if when you're talking about collaboration, you're only talking about 1 or 2 people, then clearly if you've got less than 6 people, you can't all be wearing different hats. So you might have to interchange these hats, and maybe 1 or 2 of you are wearing more hats. So you take on the yellow hat, feel optimistic about the positive outcomes of the idea or the project, and then you sense check that with the black hat. But what this is really is it's like a very kind of sort of sensible, if you like, approach to really kind of balancing a collaboration. It's not just jumping in with, surrounding yourself by lots of people who are just like you. And what it is, it gives you different perspectives. And that's really one of the core reasons why I really like this model. So when you're collaborating, think, okay, if I'm failing to take all of these perspectives, who could I get in to help me? Who could I collaborate with? Who could help me form a little team maybe to actually solve this challenge or this problem? And could we collectively cover all of this hat wearing? In other words, could somebody be really good at the fact finding and maybe that's not you? So get somebody else in. Could somebody be really, really, sort of very strongly intuitive? That might not be you, so get somebody in. And basically make sure that all of those bases are covered. And to me, that's a really sound starting point and a kind of a creative way to begin this whole kind of collaboration effort. So we're already starting here to kind of begin to create a team. Okay, now team isn't necessarily a big thing. It could be a team of 2, a team of 3, or it could be a multidisciplinary team if you're working in a big organization with big projects that have, big audacious goals. The one thing I would strongly encourage you to do, and I've just kind of mentioned it in passing there, is to really start thinking about the balance within the team. Okay, so the very first thing I want you to think about if you are looking to get into a collaboration is to not select lots of people who are carbon copies of you. In other words, don't just try and replicate yourself. There is a danger that because a lot of us kind of view the world from our own sort of perspective, we think that everybody else does similar. And so what we want to do is surround ourselves with people who are just like us because it's kind of safe. But of course, as Edward de Bono would say, is you're not seeing those creative other perspectives. So as we begin to create a team for collaborating to achieve objectives and success and to solve project challenges, my first piece of advice would be to think about balancing your introverts and your extroverts. Okay, because they will have a very different take on the challenge or the project to solve. Okay. So by introverts and extroverts, what we don't mean is quiet people and noisy people. The definition of introversion and the definition of extroversion is often misquoted. And one of the key things to do is to establish very, very quickly who are introverts and who are extroverts. So introverts are people who get their energy from within. Okay, so they don't need to be fueled by interactions with others. Doesn't make them better, doesn't make them less strong, doesn't make them non-team workers. It just means that they get fuel from inside. Extroverts, on the other hand, are people who will actually get fueled by the team interaction. So it's almost like they don't necessarily want to be sort of reflecting and being inside. They want that team dynamic. And often when we recruit teams, even particularly if you're looking to recruit somebody, in the job description for the actual new recruit or the new hire, we will probably say must be a good team worker. And actually what we're doing there is saying we must have extroverts in the team. But actually there is a huge part that can be played by introverts, the more reflective, kind of self-reflecting, mindful people who actually aren't necessarily the ones who are the most verbal in a team meeting. They will be the ones who possibly take a little bit longer to come back with comments and ideas. But it doesn't mean those comments and ideas are any less valuable just because they took extra time. And often you'll get a different perspective from an introvert because they will view the world differently. So the first point there is to think about balancing the team. And I've taken that very, very simple kind of starting point, because collaborating with somebody who is not what you are. So if you're an extrovert, you get energy from others. Think about creating a team that includes introverts. Don't just surround yourself with, socialites. Surround yourself with reflectors as well. It becomes a very interesting experience that kind of ticks the boxes of the things that you're not necessarily a specialist in. There's also a very, very interesting model. There are many, many models like this in terms of, team creation and kind of balancing good teams when you're looking to collaborate. One of my favorites actually is developed by the entrepreneur Roger Hamilton, and it's from his business and his consultancy. And he's got a model called Wealth Dynamics, and he created a model that talks about some very, very specific descriptions, if you like, of people as you're building a team. And what he says is ideally what you want is a pure balance of one of each of these in your team. Now, it might be because it's only a small collaboration or a small team that, you double up, and that some people are actually more than one of these profiles. But interestingly, if you can balance this out, you get a really nice team. There will be some challenges, and I'll talk about those in a little while, but if you can start, and of course, this is all about team creation. We're not talking about the team dynamic. We'll talk about that in a while. What we're doing here already is just starting to think about creating a team where people have a different perspective or a different take on the challenge that you have been set, or that you've set, or the new business startup that you're doing, or the campaign that you're going to run, or the new product you're bringing to market. If you can have a broad base of perspectives by taking people who actually view the world differently and actually have a specialist preference that they'll bring to the team, then you stand a very, very good chance of getting a very, very balanced outcome. Because, of course, if everybody is exactly the same, this is very unlikely to happen. So let's use some of the wealth dynamics by Roger Hamilton examples. So let's begin with let's have a look at one of these, the creator. Okay, so this is the first one of these personas, if you like, or profiles. And they have, the creator has a preference for innovation and product-centric approaches to the world. So they will always be looking for the new kind of technical idea or the efficiency behind actually what they're doing. So they'll be the creator, and they will probably be an ideas person. So you probably want one of those in the team. The star is another persona, and they're always on the lookout for, not necessarily star as in performance, but they're actually looking out for ways of kind of improving the communication or the branding or the profile or the personality of what you're looking to do as a team or as a project. There's also the supporter. And this is a really important one. It doesn't mean that they're supportive and kind of underlings, if you like, underneath the creator and the star. All of these are at the same level, or they can be if you want them to be. But the supporter is one of the personas in the team in a nicely balanced collaboration, who are building the team and they're networking. They're very much about the interrelationships within the team, leaving the creator to get on with the innovation, leaving the star to be looking at the communication elements. So do you see what's happening here? What you're doing is you're building these profiles to balance out and almost share responsibility across this collaboration. Next one in Roger's list is the deal maker. And this is all about actually connecting the dots and actually, spotting how things are interconnected and networking and joining together. So the deal maker is always going to be on the lookout for project sponsors, for example, or for other stakeholders who could be adding value in. And of course, the star isn't looking that way. The supporter's probably doing it, but internally. And the creator, well, they're still focused on the product. So they haven't got time for that. But the deal maker can come in and actually, forge those links in a really strong way. The trader is the next one, and they're all about the timing, the trends, the volume, the numbers, the kind of really, sort of making it happen, doing the deal, as it were. So if you need budget, if you need some funding, if you need some kind of external support, the trader would be a really good hands-on person to get involved here. Now, as you can see, there could be some crossovers, and this is where certain individuals might be able to perform more than one function. But if you were trying to do this project by yourself, you're probably not a creator, star, supporter, deal maker, and trader at equal levels. So identifying your own specialism, your own preferences is a really great, strong starting point that allows you then to infill with others who are probably better or have a preference to do these things more than you do. Next one, as we go around this mix in the team, is the accumulator. Now, the accumulator is a very interesting one because they've always got their one eye on the long term. So they're looking probably more strategically than some of the others in your team. The accumulator is looking at that longer term thinking. In other words, okay, trader, if you go and do that, how is that going to impact on our longer term collaboration or project or business? The deal maker's kind of doing the stuff right now, making it happen now, but the accumulator's got that strategic vision to see what's coming. And that's interesting. The next one, and there are only two left in this model, the next one is the Lord. Now, the Lord might appear as though that's going to then sit above the others, but it's not. These are all potentially at the same level if you choose it that way. But the Lord is all about refining the cash flow in the project. So they will take probably the reins of the financials within the project or the collaboration. They'll understand how the project is flowing. And when we talk about cash flow, yes, it could be financial, but it could also be the project plan more generally. They'll have this more holistic view, and they'll be very good and very strong at communicating within the team the balance of resources. They'll identify where there might be gaps or opportunities to bring something or somewhere else in. So they'll be kind of greasing the cogs, as it were, of the big project machine that you're creating. And the final one is the mechanic. And I've left this one to the end because this one is me. And I always identify with this one. This is about the optimization of the process. So the mechanic doesn't necessarily get their hands dirty. That is definitely not me. But it's the part of the process that is looking to optimize it. So they will see where there's wastage. They'll see where there are efficiency gains to be had. They'll spot the opportunities. They'll be almost like an alchemist. They'll be able to take a few of the elements of the project or the challenge, and they'll be able to synthesize those down. So less is more. And so by balancing the mechanic, creator, star, supporter, deal maker, trader, accumulator, and Lord in this wealth dynamics, and do the research because you can find this model online very easily if you want to find out more. What you stand a chance of doing is leaving no stone unturned. And teams or projects or collaborations that work with people who are, in those areas of strength or preference. It doesn't necessarily have to be that you're very good at these things or that anyone in your team is particularly good, but if they have a preference to be dealing with you and collaborating with you using some of these skills, then that in itself is a big, big strength. So it is about balance, and it is about embracing diversity. One of the lovely models that really does kind of do a very deep dive into diversity, and you may have come across this in the past, is the Myers-Briggs Personality Preferences, MBTI, the Myers-Briggs models. And these, when you're creating teams, are very, very interesting checklists to get a balance, really. And these are preferences. They're not right or wrong, a little bit like I was saying before about the extroverts and introverts, which is part of the model, and I'll talk those through in just a moment. But what we're not doing here is saying that one is right or wrong, one is stronger and one is weaker. What we're saying is these are just preferences that people have. It doesn't mean they can't do the other things, but it just means that if you're looking to get into a collaboration, you're probably better off doing this very mindfully, knowing the kinds of preferences of how people are very likely to interact within your collaboration or project or team. And these personality preference types come in basically four pairs. So the first pair is extroverts and introverts. We talked a little bit about that. So making sure that you balance your extroverts and introverts is really quite helpful. Second pair are the intuitives and the sensors. So the intuitives have that kind of gut feel for when something feels right or feels appropriate, whereas the sensors want to see hard facts. Okay, so they will sort of be there, okay, prove it, give me evidence. Whereas the intuitives will be thinking, yeah, but I just know that feels right. So they'll use the word feel, I feel this, or I feel that. Whereas the sensors are more likely to use the language, I think this, or I think that. So you can spot those little cues, even if it's somebody you don't know particularly well. Just listen to how they describe their interaction with things. And you'll often hear the word feel with an intuitive, and think with a sensor. And the idea would be that if you could balance maybe an extroverted sensor with an introverted intuitive, what an interesting mix and combination that would be. Would that add value to your project? Of course, when you do this combination, there are multiple combinations, obviously, because each of the extroverts can have the other 4 personality types associated with it. So there are multiple combinations. But what I'm trying to help you to do here is just to sort of think, look, if I'm going to collaborate and I'm going to infill, I need to embrace diversity. Because the other thing I can do then here is thinking about the thinkers and the feelers, which are the next personality types in MBTI. So the thinkers will be the ones who kind of tend to make their decisions using logic. In other words, they will say, okay, well, look, logically, this is going to happen. Logically, if we do that, logically, this decision is going to lead to this. Whereas the feelers will be looking at their own kind of values, their own kind of sensations in the way that it kind of feels to make that decision. So the thinkers are going to be led by the head and the feelers probably led by the heart. And again, no right or wrong, no better or less strong, no stronger or weaker. This is just personality preferences. So again, here, are you starting to identify with what you might be? Are you an E or an I, an extrovert or an introvert? Are you an intuitive or a sensor? Do you prefer hard facts or do you like going with gut feel? Are you a thinker, logical, sort of, objective decision making, or do you feel your way through decisions? And then the final one, and this is really key, really, really key in your team working and your collaboration, are the judges or perceivers. Okay, now judges don't mean they're judgmental, okay, but judges is the name that MBTI and Myers-Briggs have given to the personality preference type that is tending to be quite organized, okay, so they'll work before they play. So if you have a judger on your team, they would be somebody who would want to see the project plan. They'd want to see the timeline. They'd want to get started on the project. They wouldn't be somebody who would say, hey, let's just go and have a drink at the bar, or let's go and have a coffee and just chat this through, because that's the perceiver. The perceiver wants to kind of feel their way into it. They want to leave the options open. So they probably wouldn't want to be tied down to a plan because they want to get into discussion and explore opportunities. Doesn't mean the judges can't do that, but the judges want to see some objective kind of timeline and plan. They want to be organized, whereas the perceivers want a bit more flexibility. Now, of course, if you are one or other of each of these, and of course, we all fall into these categories, we can all identify somewhere on the spectrum between extrovert, introversion, intuitive and sensing, thinking and feeling, and judging and perceiving. And we're all on these spectra. And the thing is, it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. And it doesn't mean you have to now consciously go out and find these people, but just being aware that people will be viewing your project or your collaboration from their own personal perspective gives us at least half a chance to jump in and actually save it, because then we can start to think, okay, I can see you don't want to be tied down to this. You're clearly not as much a judger as I am. You're more a perceiver. Right. So how can I then play this? How can I play this collaboration or this team working or this relationship knowing that? And if you're a thinker rather than a feeler, if you see people kind of really easing into decision making and they're kind of feeling their way through it and they need a little bit of time to kind of see how something feels, and you're thinking, well, it's just a logical decision because there's the facts, then you've got to really appreciate that they're coming at this from a different angle. So do you see how these things kind of build a really nice, interesting, and really sort of fascinating collaboration web? Because I think that's really what we're creating here, this opportunity to really view the world differently from the other people you're collaborating with, from their perspective. So see, when you're starting to put your team or your collaboration together, see if you can balance this out, because if you're all extroverts, that has an impact. If you're all introverts, that has an impact too. Intuitive and sensing, thinking and feeling, judging and perceiving. No right or wrong, just preferences. And as I say, it doesn't mean you cannot learn the skills. I am strongly, when I look at my MBTI profile, I'm strongly introverted. I'm an introverted, intuitive, thinking judger. Okay, so I am INTJ. I'm proud of it, of course, but that is what I am. But it doesn't mean I can't do projects with extroverted, sensing, feeling perceivers. I just had to really step into their shoes more consciously to be able to do that, because I always go back into my preference. And this is what this is. It's a preference. It's not a capability. But when you're doing your team and putting your team together, it's always really interesting to kind of see if you can just balance things out. And your collaborations will be far more effective just being aware that this stuff is going on. Okay, so we've got a team now put together. So we've got our team, it's nicely balanced. We've got some creators and some mechanics and some traders and some deal makers. And, we've got some extroverts and introverts and judges and perceivers and all this stuff. And we've balanced it. We think we're onto something good. So how do we now actually do collaboration? How do we start to get our team to interact effectively? Well, Cohn and O'Connell have come up with a very interesting set of 6 habits of highly effective teams, and that actually is their subject of one of their books. So if you search 6 habits of highly effective teams, you can get the book on the topic. And it's a really powerful, very, very simple checklist of things to remember to do. So if you are leading the collaboration or the project or the team, this is a great little leadership skill to bring in and introduce into the team, because everybody, including you, will benefit from this. This is so proven over many, many decades of research and delivery. So the 6 habits of highly effective teams. Number 1, strengthen emotional capacity to improve relationships. In other words, if you know the stuff that we've already talked about, the MBTI preferences, something like the wealth dynamics model, just the difference between proper definition of extroversion and introversion, share it with the team. Help the team members, help those you're collaborating with to understand that we all have different perspectives. Expand the team's self-awareness as you spot interesting little dynamics between just even the way people interact. And you might have a couple of people who just seem to really get on, whereas maybe one of them doesn't get on with this person over here. Expand the team's self-awareness in a non-judgmental way. Explore how you can help them to kind of open up. Why do you think this is? Maybe you do some team profiling. And then the wealth dynamics model has a number of questionnaires that will give you the reports. I'm not sponsored by Roger, but Roger Hamilton's process there is actually a very, very good one. So that might be worth going and having a little look at. So search him up, and you can then do for each of the team members, you could in theory then do a profile. Practicing empathy and respect. This is so, so key. So many people now are focusing on empathy and respect in their just general business relationships, as well as, within sort of tight collaborating teams. Empathy is all about stepping into the other person's shoes and taking the respectful view and not judging. Okay, it's just appreciating and embracing difference. And that is really key here. And as you do that, you can step into the 4th habit of a highly effective team, which is establishing and regulating team norms. In other words, actually agreeing what is good practice within this team. Let's actually establish some really, really good kind of habits within the team. And let's kind of appreciate these. Look, we're getting on really well. Or there's certain ways that when we interact, we do this in a very, very strong way. And actually, we're not so good at this bit. So let's actually kind of upskill. Let's maybe we'll go on a little training course, or, just actually share. Maybe we do a mind dump of all the ideas for improving a little element of how we interact. This is one of the habits of highly effective teams. They continuously improve the norms that their team, or the habits that their team operates by. 5th habit of a highly effective team is thinking laterally. We talked a little bit about that earlier with Edward de Bono's 6 hats, and I would say that probably is a great starting point. It opens up thinking differently. Just because you might be in an organization that actually has very, very stringent and sort of very, very set processes, this doesn't mean you can't get creative. Collaboration is about being different. It is about pivoting. It is about taking a different perspective. So let's start to embrace thinking laterally and kind of get outside of the box. And the point 6 of habits of highly effective teams is entrusting people with appropriate rules. In other words, actually giving people accountability. If you are somebody who loves to micromanage your team, or when you collaborate, you want to be over and in everything, this is the time to step back. Once you've agreed an action, once you've agreed an objective, step back and give the person accountability to come back. If you've got open communication within this highly effective team, they're going to come back and tell you if something goes wrong. Entrust and set the rules, set the ground rules for engagement, but also for reporting. These are really, really key things in collaboration. We'll talk a little bit about more communication in just a short while. But I would say get a hold of that book, do the research here, because this is not new stuff. This is very, very well proven activity, if you like, in terms of collaboration. So what actually then does a top performing team look like? If you have a team, it could be 2 or 3 people, it could be a huge multidisciplinary team, like I said before. What does it actually look like, this team? So if it's very well balanced in terms of preferences, in terms of skills, in terms of agreed norms and habits, you've kind of set the ground rules really for making this thing forward. How does it look? Well, the key thing to remember here is that you and nobody else is the collaboration itself. Okay, the collaboration, and this happens in a relationship as well, is you're not the relationship. It is a thing, it's an entity, it's a central place, objective, platform, location, or just thing, or contract even, that sits between the group of people who are collaborating or who are in a relationship. So think about your collaboration as being something that is not actually you or anybody else, it sits between you, and that you all foster it, you all fuel it, you all respect it, you all honor it. So it's a thing that can grow of its own right. So if you have a product and you're looking to maybe evolve this product or bring a new version out, you can see there's a tangible product that you're all collaborating to work on. But if it's something a little bit more ethereal, it doesn't actually exist in the real world, maybe create an agreement or a contract that sits between you that allows you all to contribute to it, because you yourself are not the collaboration. And I think once you get your head out of that, it allows you to just ease back a little bit and allow others to do their part of the bargain, their part of the deal, so that you don't have to feel responsible. Even as a team leader, you don't have to ultimately feel responsible for everything that happens, because it's not you. And it's really, really empowering to others to feel really, really accountable within a collaboration. And particularly when there are people who like to micromanage, this is the time to maybe try a different way. So the top performing team with this thing at the center, how does it then kind of start to move the game forward? Well, the first thing to do would be to give the team or the collaboration a name, something you can actually refer to, Project X, and I'll just call it Project X because I can't off the top of my head think of a better example, but Project X would be the collaboration itself. Okay, so it has a name, so you can talk about it as an entity. And then you can establish the culture, the style, the tone of voice that this entity has. And of course, as we've said before, it's agreeing the terms of engagement into which the style and the tone of the voice comes. What kind of collaboration or project or team working do you want? How is it going to sound and feel? Is it really open? Is it really lighthearted? Is it really deep? Is it kind of evidence-based? What is it you want this to be? And agree those terms of engagement. Everybody, bar none, need to agree. Okay, because if you have any dissenter, that is not going to work for you, as we'll hear in just a moment. So making sure that everybody agrees in these terms of engagement is a key way to make this work. And think about things like, well, how will we reach decisions? Because if we're a big team, we've got to figure out, is this a bureaucracy? Is this a dictatorship? What is this thing? So actually finding a way to agree collectively how you're going to reach decisions is key. What will accountability look like? So when you say, yep, you're accountable for that action, can you go away and do that task? I give you full responsibility for it. Do you really? Is that right? Have you all agreed that? Is the person taking that accountability willing to take it on? Because some people might not want to be doing that. So it's about the agreement of these terms before you start. Do you see what's happening here? This is all about clarity. I said right at that very, very first sort of opening line when I was talking about the definition, this is about clarity. This is what collaboration is really. It is about clear communication, and it is really that simple. But it is also about process. So if you find, and it's very likely, particularly if it's a longer project or a longer collaboration, that things will change, how will changes to your plan be managed? How will you go to a plan B? How will you form, maybe on the fly, how will you form a contingency plan? Plan B, plan C, plan D even. How is that going to happen? So agreeing your terms of engagement within the collaboration is absolutely essential to making sure that that actually is going to be a top performing team, not just a team of people who come together, really like each other, but nothing really gets done. This is about activity. This is about outcomes. This is about real true focus as much as it is about, good and clear communication. But not all the time are things going to go well. So how do you deal with underperformance? So you've started off with, a fair wind and, great intentions, and everybody's up for this. And then slowly but surely, things, for whatever reason, start to crumble. And it could be people get distracted, they get called onto other things. It might be that actually they didn't really buy into the whole strategy anyway. It might be they just simply don't fit, or that they don't have the technical skills that you thought they did, and actually now they're underperforming. Or it may be that you feel you need to pull away and actually let somebody else step into the role that you were meant to be performing. Whatever the reason, teams and collaborations have a tendency at some point, it might not be catastrophic, but it could be that you need to increase performance. So how do you deal with underperformance? Well, one of the first things you can do is to find an appropriate team sponsor or mentor, somebody who hasn't got a vested interest, but they're genuinely interested in the project that you're doing. So could you find somebody who would be willing to kind of give their kind of objective view to maybe identify stuff that you guys are just too close to? Maybe it's that you've been wearing that yellow hat from the Edward de Bono model we talked about before, and actually you've got a bit too much optimism. And actually what you need to do is foster the optimism with a bit of realism. So those interchangeable hats where you actually look for some problem solving as opposed to just be looking at the opportunities, strengths, weaknesses, and threats. That SWOT analysis that we all know so well in business. Maybe it's time to actually create one of those so that you can actually look positively to the future in your project or your collaboration, but actually do it with a realistic angle or through realistic glasses. Focus as well on being easy to work with. I think a lot of people going into collaborations think, hey, it's all about, great team working and this, that, and the other, but actually I'm still going to behave like I always behave. I'm going to say it how it is. And that might not be appropriate for the team or for the collaboration. So focus on yourself and reflect on being easy to work with. Be a good collaborative soulmate, as it were. Be really, really good to work with. And looking at yourself, put the mirror up and say, am I doing all I can in terms of the ease of communication, in terms of being helpful, not being over helpful, but just being easy to work with. And there may well be times where we need to agree to disagree, and that's fine, as long as the terms of engagement are that we are allowed to disagree, but we're going to do it in an amicable, an authentic and honest and a respectful way. That is totally fine. And we're probably going to learn more as individuals and as a team if we do disagree, because if everybody agrees, well, where's the learning? It's only really when we face adversity that we start to realize, yeah, we could actually learn something here. So focus on being easy to work with and agree to disagree. And if you're underperforming as a team, conduct a tech and people gap analysis. In other words, a really, really authentic and honest, flip chart session where you stand at the front of the team, and it might even be a virtual meeting, but you actually get all the ideas of where the issues or the challenges might be and identify where the priority gaps are. Just by taking some time out and your foot off the gas of the collaboration or the project gives you the space to be able to do that. Because sometimes we just race ahead and it becomes so busy and we're so stretched and haven't got the resource or the time to be able to do that. Well, if you do, it's amazing what you can uncover. And then you'll probably find that you'll race ahead far more smoothly and far quicker as a result of doing it. And Cohn and O'Connell actually quote in their book as well, the 6 Habits of Highly Effective Teams. They say a really interesting quote, which is to expand your stakeholders' vision. In other words, constant and continuous learning and development and improving from within the collaboration, from within the team. So actually learning and building together and helping everybody who is a stakeholder in your project or your collaboration to kind of view something just a bit bigger and a bit bolder, maybe even audacious than they would have done before. So helping people to actually learn as part of the experience is a really, really surefire way to get everybody back on board again. Because it's very, very easy, and particularly in a longer term project, to actually lose sight of why we're here doing this. We've got so bogged down in all the tactical day-to-day actions, and we're very good at that, but it's tedious now. And to lose sight of the big vision. So come back to that, maybe on a periodic basis. It's time to expand your stakeholders' vision and look at what would we do if, ask that question, what if? And maybe take the barriers down in those meetings just once in a while, just to engender a little bit more freshness, if you like, within the team. So I'm just going to finish up now with some top tips for effective collaboration. Loads of stuff to be looking at. Go and do some research on the 6 Hats model, Edward de Bono, Wealth Dynamics by Roger Hamilton, Myers-Briggs, MBTI, loads of different ways that we can engender better collaboration going forward. But I think there are 4 key points, and these would be the top sort of 4 tips I'd like to leave you with for effective collaboration going forward into 2022, because this is when we're going to need it even more. We are going to be doing less and less by ourselves. We're going to be co-creating more and more. So I'd say number 1 top tip is to engender great personal habits: self-reflection, self-awareness, empathy, respect, listening, and taking time out to other people to really truly listen, I think, is a really key thing. And these are just great personal habits, and understanding and embracing diversity, saying, I'm not going to learn anything if I just surround myself with people just like me. What I really want are different people who are going to add value to this collaboration or this project, because then I'm going to learn and develop myself, and we all are working with each other. Top tip number 2, I would say, is agree a clear brief. Not just strike up a clear brief, but agree a clear brief. Don't sign that contract of that entity that sits between you until everybody agrees, because as soon as you do that, then you're all singing from the same hymn sheet. Nice British sort of saying there, because that is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to collaborate from a jointly agreed perspective. We're all going to have a different angle and a different spin on things, and that's what we want. But collaboration comes around from agreeing a very clear brief. Top tip number 3, I would say, is celebrating reflective or playback listening. In other words, actually summarizing. When somebody tells you something or says something to you or asks for something, you play back your understanding of what they've just said. We talked about this in a previous session when I was talking about communication skills and the art of active listening. Well, this is playback listening or reflective listening, where you don't just listen and make the notes, you actually summarize back to the person what you believe you've understood. And it gives that other person in this collaboration a chance to correct you if you haven't quite heard it correctly, or if they didn't explain it particularly clearly in the way they thought they had the first time. And this is a really, really neat little skill for effective collaboration. You really can't go wrong if you do this, because then everybody consistently is communicating accurately. And ultimately, the top tip for effective collaboration is to work to a jointly valued strategy. In other words, the outcome in the longer term from being together in a relationship, in a team, collaborating, joint working, whatever you want to call it, if you're working to a jointly valued longer term outcome or a strategy that's going to give a better outcome for yourself, everybody you're working with, and everybody around you, you then stand an amazing chance to actually end up in a situation where everybody has had a win-win. So that's the end of this particular webinar. I hope you found that quite interesting. I certainly think for me it is quite a fascinating topic, because what it does is it brings together so many of the different kind of elements and threads of the other things that we've been talking about through this series. So it is about communication, it is about networking professionally, it is about persuasion and negotiation, all those kinds of things. But it is about considering this entity between you and the others that you're in business or associating with. And that to me is the key of this thing, is you are not the collaboration, but you're fueling it, you're respecting it, and you're honoring it. So we have 2 more webinars in this upcoming series, and I'd love it if you can make it along to those. That would be great. On the 10th of December, we've got reflection skills. That is about looking inward and kind of really tapping into some of the innate skills and possibilities that come from within you. And I've got a whole host of things I want to share with you on that one. Really excited about that webinar. And then we'll finish the year on the 17th of December with self-motivation. We have been running these webinars on a fortnightly basis. So if you've been used to the fortnightly schedule, it is slightly different because of Christmas. So the self-motivation one on the 17th of December, rather than on Christmas Eve, we're bringing that one forward a week. So it is the 17th of December for self-motivation. And of course, as you're probably already aware, it's marketingcollege.com/events for registration, and all of these you do need to pre-register for. So I'd love it if you did that. Get along there now, because the pre-registration now is already there and available on that link. And if we haven't before, and I always end on this particular slide, because I know I've probably opened up a whole host of different sort of questions and opportunities for you. If you want to connect with me, and it would be great if we're not already connected, you can find me on social at Neil Wilkins X, and then you can DM me there any questions going forward. If you find that you've got a great example and it's working really well as a result of one of these webinars, it would be really amazing to hear from you. Alternatively, if you just want to connect and we can stay in touch, that would be brilliant. You can also follow this and other very, very similar broadcasts on the Neil Wilkins podcast, and you can find that on all of your favorite podcast channels, from Apple Podcasts to Spotify and beyond. Just search Neil Wilkins podcast on Google and you will find me. And you can also listen to this and other very similar marketing podcasts on the Cambridge Marketing College podcast. So there's a lot of follow-up information, and we will be introducing a new webinar series ready for January in the very, very near future. And we will be making that public as well through those podcasts. So do connect. It would be great to hear from you, and great to stay in touch. So thank you very, very much for coming along to this webinar today. I hope you found it useful, and I look forward to welcoming you onto a similar webinar very, very soon.